Williams. I'm a trustee with the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation, and I'm also the proud mom of a recent CHS grad and a current CHS student. And in my role as trustee, some of us at the foundation have been having conversations with district leadership about basically how complicated school funding is and how few of us really understand what goes into figuring out the resources that are available to our district. So before we get to the point of setting the budget for our district for next year, we thought it might be useful to kind of take a step back, go over the budgeting process, help everyone understand what resources we have available, and also potential opportunities for bringing more resources into the district, although I would say there's probably no quick fixes, and there's long-term work that we can all do together to help shore up the resources here. So before I hand things over to district leadership, I think our executive director, Angela Hibbard, is going to say a couple words.
Hi, Justina. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you. I'm just going to stand up because I can't see everybody back there. I'm Angela Hibbard. I'm the executive director of the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation. Please have the light refreshments. I'm a chronic over-preparer of food when I have guests. I hope you feel like a guest today. So please partake of the refreshments that are in the lobby. And as Nina said, our role at the foundation is really to work with the community to raise funding to provide resources for our students that are not possible within the general budget. And by extension, we really wanted to harness the community, start a collaborative conversation just around the budgeting process. As Nina said, it's complex. And there's an education for all of us. Today isn't really about kind of decision making. There's no easy answers, but our hope is that we all become more informed about the process, about the situation for our district, and leave with some ideas of what we all can do as individuals, which might look different, for all of us. So I just want to thank you for being here. By definition, one thing we all have in common in this room is that we care about education. We're all giving up our Thursday evening to come talk about, what can we do to ensure the best resources for all of our students. And so I just want to extend my gratitude to all of you for being here.
All right. Well, good evening. I'm Ryan Austin, the superintendent here of the school district. I've been here, this is going on year 9 as the superintendent, but I've been a resident of Corvallis for close to 25 years. My kids both started at Catherine Jones Harrison, and then they are both now in college, having one graduated from CHS and one from CV. And that's just because I'm the superintendent, they each had to go to one of the high schools. But really was their own choosing, and for them, it was good decisions, and it's allowed them opportunities as they've moved on into higher ed. So as a community, I know we care a lot about public education. We have so many different facets of education, from preschools through K-12 through college and university here. And so as a community, we care a lot about it. We have lots of conversations about it, and we have lots of support for our work. And so I want to take a moment just to thank you for being here tonight. You all showing up here again highlights the support our community has for what happens in our K-12 schools. And we couldn't do it without the input you provide us and the support you provide us as well. So our plan tonight is to have Lauren, who is our business director, share some information. Some of it you may have seen at previous board meetings, but we wanted again to create a space for the community to come together, get some information about what's going on with our school district. We also have Dr. Lahui White-Bear, who's the chair of our school board. She's going to share some information about advocacy as well. And then finally, we have some questions that we're going to want you to provide us some feedback on, as well as some Q&A. So that's really the plan that we have for this evening. Sorry that it's warm in here. Spring has sprung, and now all of a sudden we're all overdressed. So that's just the nature of summer, winter, spring, and fall in Oregon. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to take us through some information.
Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. Well, thanks for being here tonight. See several friendly faces, and we really appreciate your support and engaging in this. I think that's really important. And so, like Ryan mentioned, some of this information has been shared already at board meetings and in different spaces, but we really wanted to make sure that we provided this space as well, and also an opportunity for feedback. Okay, so when we talk about the budget, just in general terms, it's really important to understand how K-12 is funded. So I'm going to go over that at a high level here. Okay, so our biggest pot of money, if you call it, is our general fund. Our general fund is made up of 85% state school fund revenue. So that's a combination of state and local funds. And that is distributed to us on a per student basis. So that's really the majority of our funds. Then next largest pocket, apparently it's a little tired.
Want me to help?
I was gonna say, you're
I-
gonna press it ahead, okay.
I can drive.
He's heard this once or twice, so he probably knows what I'm saying. So our next bucket of funds is our local option levy, and I think that's really evident by the amount of people in this room that we have a really supportive community and why we're able to bring in that 11%, which is just over $10 million every year. And so we have had that levy renewed over and over again by our really supportive community. And that allows us to do some extra things for students that we wouldn't be able to do without those funds. And then the last 4% in our general fund are what we call other revenues. And really that's just interest earned on investments. So when you all pay your taxes prior to November, we get a huge chunk of change, $30 million-ish, all in November. I don't need $30 million in November, so we invest that, and we do get some returns, but it's not a huge amount, but it does help us do some additional things. So since the state school fund is our largest bucket of money, I think it's important just to dig into that a little bit further. So as I mentioned, it's a combination of state and local funds that's dedicated to operations of K-12. So it includes local property taxes, a small amount of other county and state level grants, and a 70% reimbursement for transportation. And that is the home to school transportation, none of the additional activities, but that home to school, which is really important because we spend over $6 million transporting kids from home to school every year. So that's an important one. Something that's really important to understand about the state school fund is that it's an equalization formula. So in Benton County, we have a fairly high tax rate and tax basis, but that's offset by the state funds we receive. So in communities where they have a low tax basis, they're going to receive more state assistance and vice versa. So that way, across the state, every district is bringing in about the same amount of money per student. So the state school fund is appropriated biennially by the Oregon legislature. So if you have heard, the long session is now open, and we're actually hitting some milestones this week within the long session, but they are currently discussing how, at what level they will fund schools next year. So as of now, the allocation for the next biennium is undetermined, and when we adopt a budget, we most likely will not know how much money we will be receiving from the state. So that's fun. And also, like, maybe I should be more concerned about that, but I'm not, because we do it every other year. And it's just part of the nature of the game. So we do have to have a budget adopted by June 30. You've heard before about government shutdowns. The concept applies to local governments as well. I have not ever heard of that happening in Oregon, but we do have to meet that deadline. Therefore, we cannot wait for the state to meet their deadlines in order to meet ours. So that planning is underway now. And then, like I mentioned, it's funded on a weighted per student basis. So we receive additional funds for students navigating poverty, for our students on IEP, so they're special education students, for our English language learners, pregnant and parenting students. I think I hit all of them. So in the current year, the estimated funding is about $10,592 per what we call weighted student, which takes into account if they have any of those other qualifiers. Okay, and then another important thing to talk about is federal funding, as this is sort of a hot topic right now. So we receive about a little over $10 million in federal funds, which makes up 6% of our overall budget. So when I was talking about the general fund, that's one bucket of money. It's about 60% of our overall dollars. And then when I'm showing this pie graph here, this is talking about all the resources that we have available. So about 6% of our overall resources are federal. So up here are listed several different sources. We have Title I, II, III, 4, and 6. Those support our highest poverty elementary schools. So that's Letitia Carson, Lincoln, Garfield, and Mountain View. It supports effective teacher instruction. We use all of those Title II dollars for professional development for staff. It supports language instruction for English learners and immigrant students. Student support and academic enrichment, and the initiatives around that one change from time to time, but that's the general theme there. And then also the Indian Education Programs, which is a new grant that we have received. This is our first year. Second year. And Dr. Whitebread was a part of helping us getting that going. So that's another one of our federal sources. It supports child nutrition programs. I think that is the one that is the most scary to me if we were to lose those funds, because we do feed children for up to 3 meals per day. So we have breakfast, lunch, and we also have a supper program for our after school academic enrichment. So we also have a 21st Century Community Learning Grant, which provides the after school programming for our highest risk students, and that's all for academic support. We receive additional funding for individuals with disabilities, and that's students. I think it's important to note that that's students ages 3 to 21. It's not just 5 to 18. We're supporting students all along that continuum. And then we also receive Medicaid dollars, which allows us to bill for various different medical and mental health services that we are providing to students in our building with our staff. So when you look at that list, I hope the general consensus that you get from that is those are really important things for kids. And if we have a change to how things are funded at the federal level, that could be pretty impactful. Okay, so at this point, we've talked about the funding from a high level. And with the state school fund, I mentioned that that is all driven by number of students. So the next important piece to talk about is our enrollment. So we're going to start kind of like at the top and then dig in deeper. So this was if you're like a data nerd like we are, we really like this infographic, and this was a fun article. I do have the QR code up there, but maybe they can't scan it, but can you move the video? Is that possible? I did put QR codes throughout. If you see those, it links back to sources in case you also would like to be a data nerd with us. But this was from Ed Week, and so it's showing the projected change in graduates from 2023 to 2041. And the title of it sort of, I don't like it necessarily because it assumes like that our kids aren't achieving, and that's not what we're talking about here. But what we're talking about is that the class of 2025, so the students that are about to graduate, they will be the largest graduating class in the nation's history, between about 3.8 and 3.9 million 12th graders right now. So in the projection, based on the data referenced in this article, is that we will be seeing a downward trend through 2041, dropping below 3.4 million graduates. So think of that difference from the 3.8 to the that 3.4. I mean, it's pretty significant.
Can I say something about that? I think that's also significant for our community, knowing that we have lots of folks who work at the community college and at the university. So the trends that we're going to be seeing are the same trends that you're all going to be seeing.
And the article provides more insight about that if you're interested in that level of the education world. But the impact, really, you can see that this is nationwide. So the only area in our country that is not predicted to, as a region, decrease is the South, with just that small margin of 3%. So I think that's it's just important to know, like, as we feel this really locally, this trend is actually happening across the country and across the state. So I brought your favorite data back. Local birth rate data. So this one is really interesting. So we take this information, and you can see the light blue line on the very top. So those are births in Benton County. So the child and the biological mother put a Benton County address on their paperwork when the child was born. And so you can see that trend line, okay? Then the orange line is the CSD zip code. So the zip codes within our boundary, and you can see how that looks. And then the green line, the very bottom one, are the number of kindergartners that we capture from that the number of births in our region. So what you can see is that, I mean, the lines are trending down for sure, and that the orange and green lines are fairly close together. And what we see as far as like our capture rate of those births is that's pretty in line with what most people see. A lot of things can happen between when a child is born and when they're 5 years old. So this is fairly in line with what other districts across the state see as far as their capture rate of kinders. Oh, sorry, I didn't see where you pushed it. You can go.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
We were like,
Keep up.
we were having rhythm.
Okay. So now this is Ryan's favorite data. So this is the, well, yes and no. This is historical enrollment since 1957. So the district was incorporated in 1957. And so that's on your far left. We had around 4,500 students there. And then you can see we got up to a pretty high peak back in the 70s. And when we look at housing data, you will notice that those two peaks are in the same spot. Imagine that. And so you can see how that's trending throughout the decades. So the green line are actuals, and that orange line, or the orange dots, is where we're projected to go based on our birth rate data. Right, so I know what kindergartners have been born through 2023. So I get the data about a year after the fact. So next December, I will get the 2024 data for births. So based on that, we know what children have been born. We know what our capture rate is in the county and then in our schools. And so that's where that projection comes from. And then if you can see where the line's going, we are very close to being the lowest enrollment that we've ever been in school district history. So that's the part that's not his favorite, but looking at this all the way back to 1957 is kind of fun.
So 1959 is the year, is our comparison year for right now in terms of enrollment.
Yeah. Okay. So this slide here takes our projected enrollment by school for next year. So you can see most of our elementary schools are sitting in the 200 to 300 range. Corvallis High School is still fairly large at almost 1,300. And then we have CV at about 874. And so this data is put together by using the birth rates, cohort survival rates. We also know that we capture kids that come from private schools that don't have high school grades. So we see a larger number at that age as well. But what you can see here is that, I mean, many of our elementary schools specifically have felt that birth rate data and so have shrunk quite a bit. And we will continue to see that happening through the middle school and the high school level as those last big classes graduate out. So this shows that
See, this is that
specifically.
rhythm.
But you just interrupted. Okay, he does it all day long, it's fine. So this is our K-12 enrollment by grade. So the dark blue line is our actual enrollment this year by grade, and the green is the projected enrollment. And so what I want to show you is that 8th grade class this year, 533 students in 8th grade, that is our last large class. We also have a class of over 600 graduating out this year, right? So if we know we're getting in classes, I think my projection was 307 on the last slide for kindergartners next year. So we're losing 613 because they're graduating out on to the next steps. And we're getting in classes of around 307. So the math doesn't math in order to keep this the same level of enrollment. So that's the challenge that we're currently facing. And you can see as that large 8th grade class moves on to 9th grade next year, really that's why the middle schools will be feeling it more heavily next year. And then those kids will continue to migrate through the system. So based on this information, and if anything, if all things stay the same, enrollment should sort of even out by the 28-29 school year as we see that last bubble leave our system.
You say anything else before we move on to housing?
Do you want?
Non-listeners.
Okay. Okay. So we talked about birth rates, I think, which just, if there's less kids being born, we're going to have less kids in our school, and there's not a whole bunch we can do about that. All of this data, I am using from the city's website, so I will refer you back there if you would like to dig into their graphs a little bit more. But this one here shows the Corvallis median single family home sale price versus income. So that blue line is the median price. And then the yellow line is median family income. Okay, so you can see median family, and I mean, I probably don't have to tell you this if you are community members, you live here, you get that. But so the cost is increasing significantly. The median home price, I have to refer to my notes because this is not my data, so I'm sorry. The median single family home price was $551,000. Okay, that's not necessarily like the starter home budget that we need those young families coming in at. So you can see that there, and really, and to be able to afford a home, we actually, that's what that gray line is showing. So that difference is the problem. So that's an annual income of $167,000 to purchase a single family home, to be able to afford one. And I mean, that's probably based on, the mortgage company recommendations, which I don't know if that's always a great idea. But so in 2021, over 72% of families were not likely to find a single family home in their price range in Corvallis. 72%. Okay. And then if we think about it from the rental perspective, in 2023, family income of $57,000 is needed to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Corvallis, and a family income of $81,000 to afford a 3-bedroom apartment. Okay, and that's also if you can find one that's vacant, because we also have very low vacancy rates in our city. So according to that same data set, 24% of Corvallis families cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment, and 37% cannot afford the 3-bedroom apartment. So if you're not able to afford a space to fit a family, you're probably not going to live here. And that impacts the number of kids we have coming into our system. Okay. So this one shows the residential building permits. I think for our purposes today, the colors aren't super important. I just want you to see the trends. So like I said, you see back in the 70s where that spike is, that aligns with our enrollment spike in the district. So you can see how that's changed over time. And so this really speaks to just the availability of housing. I think this data looks a little bit different in our town because we have a college here. And so that number of duplex and multifamily units is going to be very high because of that. But it's in line with what you see in other college towns like in Eugene, that trend. So, but you can see that that single family home unit, which is that kind of purple color, hasn't changed very much since 2008. And that is what the data shows, just because we have not recovered from that recession over a decade ago, and we're not putting in the number of housing units that we need. So, and this is also why prices are really high, right? This is your basic supply and demand theory. And so that as that continues, it's going to continue to drive up the houses, the cost of houses and of rental units, and then more families won't be able to afford to live here. So, I mean, that 72% in my head is astronomical, and that's just gonna keep going up unless something changes with our housing situation. Oh, this is your other favorite. So, this one has our commuters in and commuters out. So the blue line shows the number of people, which is almost 18,000 people who commute into Corvallis every single day for work. That's a lot of people.
Wow.
The yellow is the commuters out, closer to, I think about, I'd say 12,000. And then the gray line is the number of people who live in Corvallis and also work in Corvallis. So, and it's interesting to me, this data only went through 2021, but it's interesting to me that those two dots almost touched on the gray and the yellow, and now they're splitting apart. So I would be interested to see like what this has done since then, and we'll keep an eye on that.
I think this is the thing I'd share about this slide that I think is important, just thinking about the health of the community and the folks that are available or able to live in the community, and the services that they provide. A lot of these people are coming in to work in our community, have talents and skills, but can't afford to live here. And there's a loss in that.
Okay, next. This is a good one to get a drink before. Okay, so now we're actually gonna dive into the numbers, and keep that, all of that context we just talked about in your head as we do that. One more. Okay. So as I mentioned, we talked about funding. We get funded on a biennial basis, right? So every 2 years. And so I'm going to take us through this in biennial chunks, and knowing that this current biennium is the only one that we actually know the dollar amount for. So I'm making some assumptions throughout this data. And I actually made this probably about a month ago now, so things have changed a little bit, but the concepts are still relevant. So in 23-24, you can see at the very top line is our beginning fund balance, and these numbers are in millions. Apparently I forgot to note that, but $1 million. So about $14.5 million we started the year with. We brought in just over $97 million in revenue. And then we had $92 million in expenditures. So that left us in a operating surplus of a little under $5 million. So you take the beginning fund balance, add your operating revenues, subtract your expenditures, and then you're going to get your ending fund balance. So we ended just around $19.4 million. That's about 19.94% of our total operating revenues. So, and our policy is that we need to be above 12.5. Okay, so then we take that number into the next year. So you can see that go backwards, please. You can see that the 19.39 carries up to the beginning fund balance into the next year. So that is the year that we are currently in now, which is why these numbers are squishy, because they're still happening every single day. But that 19.39, that's solid. We are projecting just about $96 million in operating revenues and about $98 million in operating expenditures. And so we are currently operating in a deficit of about $2.4 million. I'm not worried about that. That was intentional. As you may remember, we did cut over $8 million out of our general fund last year. And so knowing that we had a healthy reserve and we wanted to not overcut. We really were trying to align with our enrollment. We were going to buy down some of that reserve. And so we used $2.4 million of it. So then we are projecting the ending fund balance for this year to be just under $17 million. So that's, again, about 17%. It's nice when your budget's at $100 million. You can get your percentages real easy. So, okay, now you can go next.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to take that almost $17 million into the 25-26 school year, next school year. And we are estimating our operating revenues to be around $99 million and our operating expenditures to be at just under $107 million. So again, we are operating at a deficit of $7.5 million. That's starting to get a little concerning. I can't manage that year over year. So in order to meet our policy, we will need to take a reduction next year of just under $3 million. Okay, so now this gets a little squishy because you see this number, this 9.43 is not 12.5%, right? But I have to get 12.5% back to the next year, which is why I have to cut. So I'm assuming that we do the necessary cuts and then in 26-27, I'll actually bring over 12.41, okay? Again, we go through the whole process, and this is where just things start to get even more squishy because we can't do this. So we know there will be several changes up until this point, but what we see is that our expenditures are continually outpacing our revenues, and that deficit is becoming unmanageable. And if we did not take those corrective actions, we would end at about $850,000, which would be nice in a personal bank account. It's no good for us. That's might as well be $0 for us. So we have to take, if we change nothing, we would have to take about a $12 million cut. And if you remember, last year we did $8 million, and that was real tight, and that was hard. Okay, next. Then it gets more hairy. And the same concepts apply. We assume that we take the corrective action and we bring over the required amount and we make all the necessary adjustments. But we get to a place where we have a corrective action of $18 million, not possible. It's just not possible. And so we need to take corrective action prior to that point because that's unmanageable. We can't do that in 1 year. That has to happen over multiple years. And like I said, these are all projections. I don't know the dollar amount that we're going to get from the state, but this follows trends, so I feel okay about it as a model. Okay, this is our budget timeline. So this information was shared with the board at the February board meeting. We do have a pre-budget committee meeting in April where we just talk about the process and train on concepts. Then our 2 budget committee meetings will be May 15th. That's where there will be a budget hearing. So we will take public testimony at that meeting. The 22nd, hopefully the committee will approve the budget and the taxes so I can get that onto the school board so that they can take their action in June. And like I mentioned, we must have that adopted by June 30 or else I can't spend any money on July 1, which isn't ideal. Next, please, Ryan. Okay, so maybe, hopefully someone feels like, oh, what could I do? How can I impact this? So I've included 2 different codes here. On the left for local advocacy, these are the recommendations from the city's website. So I didn't make these up for them. These are what they're saying that they would like you to do. And if you scan that QR code, all of those things have different links. So any form or whatever that they've referenced, they link it. So ways that you can talk to them, it would be around our housing. Provide input at the city council meetings, submit written comments to them if you're not comfortable with that. You can contact the city councilors individually, so all of their contact information is available on the website. You can contact the city departments and individual staff, so the planning division, you can talk to them. You can submit input through the report a problem if you could think, I mean, there's a few problems you could report if you would like. And you can engage with their advisory group. So that's something you can do at the local level that would make an impact. And then at the state level, as I mentioned, session is currently open. So your legislators, that word is very hard for me for some reason, they're all meeting every day except for Friday. They get Fridays off for some reason. And they're deciding on their policy and their budget for the next 2 years. So that includes our funding. So if you scan that QR code on the right, you can put in your address and it will tell you who your local legislators are. And Lou has a sheet for you. She has all the information, phone numbers and emails, I think are on there, and the web pages, all the things. So you can grab that as you leave today. Okay. So there's another QR code. I promise it's the last one. So that is how you can provide feedback to us. We have drafted a survey, and you are our first test group. So I hope it works well. But this is a way for you to provide feedback to the district leaders about what's important to you from your various different perspectives. It also gives you the option to submit a question about the budget. So if you don't feel comfortable doing that in this setting, or if something comes out after the fact, you can just submit it through there and we will be answering.
Were those predicted shortfalls inclusive of the $6 million-ish from the federal government for?
No, that's if everything moves forward status quo. Tricky, right? Okay, so
For the QR code, is that also on the website or something?
I will post it on the website. Today is when we're releasing it. It's also on the handout. Thank you, sir. On the back of the handout, all of those QR codes, and there's a bunch up at the front. So, and if we need more, we will print them. But they have all the QR codes on there, so don't feel like you missed your opportunity if your camera didn't cooperate with you.
But then the same code will be used with our staff as we have staff meetings coming up, so everybody can give us input that way as well.
Yeah, and I see some staff here, so please mark all of the things that apply to you. If you're a parent, if you're a staff, if you're a community member, you can check all the boxes. And that would be great, just so we can use that information moving forward. And that is all I have to say until we have questions. I'm not sure what's next. Luke?
It's a little glowing necklace. Hi again, everyone. My name is Luke Whiteberg. I go by Lou, and as was mentioned, I'm the chair of the school board, and I also serve on the Oregon School Board Association Board of Directors for our region, which is Linn, Benton, and Lincoln counties. And so I'm really involved with a lot of the legislative work that's going on with OSBA and with the state and understanding where we're at with things. I wanted to share a couple of things with you all on, I forgot how much time we had here.
You're doing great.
Okay. I know. I was like, I can't remember how much time I had, sorry, I don't have my agenda. But the things that are being kept track of, there's over 200 bills that impact K-12 in some level that OSBA is tracking. And so we meet every week and we get updates from them on Fridays. That's like my noon hour activity or half hour to listen to what those updates are and look for opportunities to provide testimony. A lot of the things that happen at the state level not a lot. Sometimes they don't take into consideration the local impacts. And so one of the bills that was recently in the news has to do with a really well-intended bill several years ago that required fluorescent lights in all of the schools, which ended up costing schools way more than anticipated, and there was no budget analysis. And so when you're in a budget crisis like we are right now, that is something that's a major concern, to have to retrofit all the lights and buy all the new bulbs, all of those things that add up that people don't even think about. Because operating a school is more than just paying the teachers and the lunches and the buses. There's a ton of pieces to it. Obviously that's the majority of the funds, but there are the operational costs. And so when things are passed, that might seem like a really, really good idea, and they might be for some reasons, but for the school budgets, when they're not funded, they have really negative consequences. And so that's what a lot of the attention being paid on these unfunded mandates right now. There's some legislation that went on that one to give schools a grace period, especially right now, to try to figure it out. That way they don't lose their funding for non-complying with that mandate, because they can't, some school districts. And that's just one example. And other ones that impact the funding have to do with the special education funding that we're limited to put in for reimbursement at 11%. And then there's also not enough funds for the high needs funding for special education as well. And so those are a couple of the ones that I recently submitted testimony for, and through my position at OSBA on the special education one, and actually a different one, which had to do with protection of addresses of public officials, but it's related to school board stuff. And the sheet that I have, I'm really hot, so that's why I'm like, sorry. There's a sheet that's in the back somewhere. I think Kelly's getting one to show you what it looks like. So that one is one that I made that is like, that says legislative engagement, I believe, on the top. And on there it has our 3 area representatives web pages, because not all of them have email address. You have to do web form for Val Hoyle, but so I just put for consistency, it's all of their web pages that has all their contact information. And also on there is information of how to be engaged with legislative action. And so there's how to look up bills on there, because there's a lot of information online. And it gets really confusing. If you've never submitted testimony, the first time I did, I got really lost. And so I try to put some little tips on there for you all. If you are interested in something, you can look up bills by keywords. You can look them up by the bill numbers. If you don't know the bill number, you can look up keywords and it'll pull all of them. I was looking at the water ones and I was like, oh my gosh, that was way too many. I need to narrow it down. But there's that's how you look for them. And then there's ideas or tips on when to submit things. And you can also go on there if there's something really important to you. Like if you were tracking the special education one, for example, you can say, I want to get emails of when I can submit a testimony, because you can only submit those during certain times. And so those tips are on that sheet, as well as the information. There's a link to the OSBA toolkits too for legislative advocacy. So the reason why I'm sharing this all with you is because we love the community to engage with us as a school board, as your local elected folk that represent the school district, and we want to hear your voices. We do want to hear them again this budget season as well, just to make that clear. And we want you all to have tools to know where else you can help your voices be heard. And sometimes that is at the state level. And so we're not here to tell you what to submit things to or how to submit things one way or the other in support or against some of these things, but we do want you all to have those tools as community members to have your voices heard beyond just when we get this school funding. And one more thing I would say about the legislative work going on right now is the amount of funding that has been proposed to fund public education is not enough. And a lot of times we read headlines like, this is a historic amount of money that's being invested into K-12 public education, which may be true in the dollar amount, but the percentage of the state budget has been going down over the last few bienniums. And so if you look at the percentages that they're investing in K-12, not just the dollar amount, you'll see a decline of about 8%, which is a lot. And then you add in things like federal actions that have ended funding in December. There was an act that was not reauthorized that impacts rural schools. We're not a rural school, but most of Oregon is. And so they were saying like, oh, it's just a little bit of money. I was like, that's a lot of money to those schools. And then those funds are spread even more thin that were being allocated with the dollar amount being invested in K-12. And so those are all things like I'm super passionate about in general as just a person, and also as one of your elected folk that I really am engaged with. And I hope that having tools like that in sessions like this, it makes me really happy to see you all here too, actually. So I forgot to say that earlier too. But so thank you for being here as well and wanting to learn more and how to be engaged and how to advocate. And it's all these pieces together, like was shared, and it's not one thing. And so when you hear the things like in the newspapers that say we're sending all this money to the schools, there's a lot of pieces that go into that, and it's not always reflective of actually what our needs are. And the number of students might be going down, but that doesn't mean that we don't need those same services, right? And so that's one of the things I think about is like the high cost of like literally everything right now. It impacts how much it costs to operate our schools too. So if we're not getting the funds we need from the state, we can't just say, community, we need more and more, even though we really appreciate you all donating more and more. And we would hope that would continue in the future too. But we do need more from the state too, in my opinion. So, but that's all I was gonna say about the legislative work.
Well, what I'd like to say is that I feel fortunate to work with the board chair, who supports the work like Lou does. And again, thanks for all your advocacy that you're currently doing and will continue to do throughout the session. So our plan from here on out was to do some Q&A. So if folks have questions, we have two ways that we're going to go about it. One is if folks want to take the mic and ask a question, that's fine. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to pass out note cards. So if you're somebody who has a question that you want us to put into our Q&A that we're going to be building over the next several months that folks can go to, that's a way that you can do that, and you'll still get that information will still get out to the community, but you may not feel comfortable talking in front of all these folks, and that's totally fine. So note cards are available. There's some pens floating around as well, so if you have questions that you want to write down, feel free to do so. And at the same time, we're happy to answer questions. Yeah.
I forgot to tell you all too, like if you wanted to chat with me about any of this, talk longer, all my information is on the district webpage too, like my email and phone number, so feel free to reach out anytime. I love engaging with the community about this, and yeah, I just get really nerdy about it.
So, Kim, we already talked about those. So as people leave tonight, they want to make sure they get a copy of that, the materials that we put together.
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
Okay. So I designated Phil Donahue. Okay, good crowd. Okay, so we're gonna try Phil Donahue style tonight rather than having people come up to the front. One of the benefits of inviting everybody to come today is that it's a little bit more flexible than the formal school board meetings, where it can be frankly like a little bit of an awkward structure that the public meetings require. Where there's a question and there's not really an opportunity to kind of respond or have discourse. So that's what we're hoping for tonight. I'm so excited there's so many people here. We may not get to everyone's questions. So if we don't get to your question or you don't feel comfortable asking your question, please write it down on your note card. Those will be added to the kind of frequently asked questions that Lauren is keeping. And I just wanted to share, just like we would with our kiddos in school, we want to just have some guidelines to make sure that we maintain a safe, respectful environment for everybody here in the room. So I just made some notes to remind myself that I wanted to share. So starting with, as I said, we're all here because we feel really strongly about education. And so we have that in common. And I think we want to assume best intentions of everybody in the room. So even if you may have a different perspective from somebody who's asking a question or answering a question, that's okay. But we just want to maintain a safe, respectful environment so that, as many voices can be heard as possible. Please, if you have a question, try to keep it concise. We have a lot of people here. We want to hear from as many people as possible. So please try to keep your question as concise as possible. And then, along with a respectful environment, it's just listening to each other, both because that's respectful, but also because someone may have a question that you have, or their question might spark another idea, elaborating on a question you have yourself. So we're gonna try this Phil Donahue style. And if it's crazy, if we can't control this room, then we'll have to come up with a different.
We have the door open.
So if you have a question, and I have the mic, and I'm gonna ask you to ask your questions into the mic so that it's part of the recording. Otherwise, the answers will be out of context. So, what did Phil Donahue used to say? He would be like, "What's your name, sir? Where are you from?"
My name's Todd McDonald. I live in Corvallis. I just wanted to, if somebody can speak to that steadily increasing expenditures. It's looking like, 6 or 7% moving forward. And so that would be, higher probably than the projected rate of inflation. So just when we're looking at declining numbers, why is that expenditure continually increasing? I mean, of course, there's fixed overhead, so costs that are gonna be there regardless of the number of students. But like if somebody can speak to just the amount that is effectively saved in a way, per student, outside of those fixed overhead costs, just those fixed costs, and why are we seeing that, kind of steadily increasing expenditures?
So there's multiple things to answer that question, and probably something I didn't do a good job on prefacing that slide was those assumptions are that we maintain current service level, which means we carry forward staff year after year. So we know if we have less students, we most likely need to reduce staff by a similar percentage. And we also operate in an environment where we have two different union groups. So we have three groups of employees. We have our non-represented, we have our classified employees with the OSEA union, and then we have our certified employees, which are our teachers for the most part with OEA. And so we negotiate contracts with them year over year, and generally for a multi-year term when we do that. And so generally what happens is all of our employees receive what we call a step. So if you on a salary schedule receive a step, as well as a cost of living increase. So everyone is pretty much guaranteed a raise as well as a cost of living increase. Our staffing makes up over 80% of our budget. So just that factor alone is really significant when you talk about the change in cost. And I think when you take that into consideration with our housing information and how expensive it is to live here, we try to be ahead of the curve on what we're paying our employees. So we look at all of our comparator districts, and we try to be above the average pay, so that we get and we maintain really high quality staff for kids. And so that's part of it. Another interesting thing for those other expenditures is people love to charge schools more because there's some assumption that we have like monopoly money or something. Also, our projects, anytime we do capital improvements, that tends to be more expensive because we have to pay prevailing wage. Like there's a bunch of different things that go into that. And so it's multiple things. And knowing that our revenue is, I would say it's basically flat. And that's really because of the decrease in students. If we were continuing even at the same level of students, we would see a much more slanted curve as far as our revenue that would help keep up with that expenditure pace. But the difference is so large because of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure there's more details in that.
Yes.
I think it's a good overview that describes some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors at play. And when we do publish the budget document, because I'm sure you guys are all going to read the 300 pages of it, after every single section, I do call out any major variances in cost and revenues. So that might be an interesting page for you. You can just read that page. You don't have to read all of it. Okay. There's one up here, or two up here.
Okay.
Over here.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I do read your budget document.
That's great. There's like 5 people. I'm so happy.
So I'm really interested in the slide where you showed commuters in and commuters out and trends over time, and thinking about enrollment, and then thinking about students commuting in and commuting out, right? We have a new private high school coming in. We have the phenomenon of virtual charters. I've never seen data specifically about virtual charters. I've only seen a little bit of data on folks that transfer out versus transferring in. And I think a really brilliant high school student talked during the budget testimony last year about talking about how do we, if we have an enrollment crisis, how do we attract students that want to commute in, right? Rather than letting go of an increasing market and who is leaving.
Do you want to talk about the extended ethics?
So we have recently,
This is great. You keep answering all the questions.
I'm leaving early tomorrow.
That's totally fair.
So we're in the middle of gathering data, and so every so often, so I do all of our projections like for enrollment, and that's based on public data. But every so often, about every 10 years, it's good to maybe have professionals do that and make sure that I'm still on track. And so we are currently in the middle of that process. And an interesting finding that we have, and we will be publishing the report and sharing it once it's finalized. It's not to that point yet. Is that we actually have a very high transfer in rate of students, higher than many across the state. And I think that's a misconception that we're losing kids, a lot of kids, to other districts. It's just not what we're seeing. I think some of it is pretty tricky because student data, once they leave our system, we don't always have access to it. And private schools aren't required to submit the 360 reports that we are, and a bunch of other things, so it doesn't become that public data. What we do know is that, this is a fun fact, we support special education in private schools, any private school that's within our boundary. So we do have contact with the private schools in our boundary, and so every year we do get information from them about how many kids are enrolled. They are seeing very similar trends at their kindergarten level with kids coming in based on that birth rate data. So there are some kids going back and forth, but overall our capture rate of students in district as well as our capture rate of students coming in is much higher than the numbers, the averages that you'll see across the state.
And I know Sarah's a researcher, so she has all this.
Yeah, that's why I'm reading the budget.
I know. But one of the things that you mentioned too was online schools. And there's a piece that I'm sure you know about online virtuals, and it's about outcomes. And the outcomes of online virtuals are not very strong. And I feel like sometimes I'm asked, well, why don't we just add that to our repertoire? And so I often feel like that's out of my integrity because I see the results from online charters. This is being recorded, so this is going to go all over the world. But the thing about it is I don't feel like it's shown to be a successful model. And I worry about creating that option when I can't feel really solid about it.
Really quick too, about bringing students here, that would require like also bringing people that have kids to Corvallis too, as well as just to commute in. And so I would say that goes along with some of the other messaging that the district has been providing about helping make Corvallis feel like somewhere people want to come and can afford to be at. And so there's a lot that goes into that besides housing, but I'll keep it at that part for right now.
Hi, my name's Brandon. I'm just curious, has there been any alternative funding sources that you've looked into or mechanisms? Any thoughts on that?
So we're pretty limited in what we could do as a public entity. We do have a local option levy within our community, which you all support, which we're very grateful for. As far as grant funding, I think there's sort of maybe a misconception about how significant those dollars could be. When we are spending a large amount of administrative time writing for grants, even if they're $1 million, like that sounds like a lot, but the amount of work that goes into that is quite significant. And so I would say at this point, we are above capacity on what we can do in those areas, and we're still doing it. So we're focusing on the biggest funding streams that we can that have the most impact. As far as other things, I mean, we've made it a priority to not charge kids for participation, which means we're going to support extracurriculars a little bit with our funds. We've made it a priority to have our free meals for students, and that requires us to put some money there. But the things that we are supporting that we could bring in a little bit of money for, first of all, it doesn't even cover the cost, begin to cover it, and it creates access issues. And and inequities. And so we're prioritizing not doing that.
The thing that I want you all to know as a community is how important that local option levy is. There are a number of communities around us that don't have a local option levy. So some of the opportunities we're able to provide are really because this community has stepped up again and again and again. That local option levy is about the equivalent of 50 teachers. And you again continue to provide support for it with like a 2/3, 67, 70% approval rating every 5 years. And that is the thing that post Measure 5, which happened back in the mid 90s. That's the biggest driver of revenue for a school district to be able to do the things that we do. So you are making a difference in that. You are doing that.
I lost control of the mic. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Shauna, and I'm a parent in the district and also a school board member, but you're representing myself in the moment. Angela, I was actually going to ask, in building on that question, if you could share a little bit about, we have the pleasure of knowing what the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation does in support and along with the district in terms of bringing in funds and really trying to fill gaps. Can you share a little bit about that?
So the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation also cannot fill, $10 million gaps in our district budget. But we do raise funds among the community that really provide, three things: enrichment opportunities for staff and students to explore that are just beyond the limited scope of the budget. So when we look at these budget projections, staff are working with less and less. And so we're able to offer grants that really help them still access resources, to be creative, to inspire their students, to find the joy in their teaching. And while the number may not be as huge, it doesn't, like there's a little sliver on those pie charts, the impact really is huge. We also provide a lot of support that helps the district support our students and families who are navigating poverty and other barriers to accessing their education, which is of course very important on so many levels. And we just simply can't do any of this, of course, without the community support. And as the district has less, our role becomes even more important. So if you don't know the foundation, if you don't know kind of how to get involved or contribute, and I'm happy to ask, that's not what tonight is about. So, I don't want to turn this into a fundraiser, but I do think it's important to know that we are here as a resource in the community to work together to help provide opportunities and resources for our kiddos. Okay, we'll go here and then we sounds like we have some questions to that.
Hi, my name is Morgan. I am a kindergartner at Adams. I was wondering if you collaborate at all with local employers, like our largest local employers like OSU and HP, on any of this, on the housing situation and sort of the affordability of, families going to OSU and things of that nature.
Yeah, so Helen was here just a few minutes ago and she left, Helen Higgins from the Boys and Girls Club. So we have been meeting with OSU, HP, the city, the county, to talk about this problem because this is a community-wide problem. Helen just recently created a space for some employees that work for the club for a lower cost rental. We've been thinking about, are there ways that we can, as an employer, come up with some available housing for staff as well? We have 100 staff alone who drive from Albany every day. So again, it is a community-wide problem and we're looking at all sorts of different ways to try to address it. There's lots of work to do.
Can I say something about that, Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay, this is just me, Nina, my personal opinion. I've lived in Corvallis for about 15 years, and I think part of why we've been talking about doing this is because I think a lot of folks do not understand the impact of our community's general posture about growth.
Yeah.
And I understand people like where they live, you like your neighborhood, you like your community, and you hear there's a cottage cluster coming in on the next block. And what do we see? Everybody shows up at the city council and says, that can't happen. And I think it's really important that we all understand that when that happens, this happens.
Right.
And so if you love your schools, you care about the schools, you care about the next generation, think about going to the city council and say, please, let's let that happen. Because if they're only hearing from the no's, it's really hard. And also when you're thinking about who you're electing to the city council, ask these questions. Because these are the long-term things that are gonna make a difference for us in Corvallis. We can't control what's happening nationally, but just wanted to add that because that wasn't really coming up.
Can I add something? And along those same lines, and thinking about how to bring things that are affordable for some families to make it feel like this city can be affordable. There's, I have, my youngest is 12 now, so I don't have as much of a problem because she can wear like my shoes. But for a while, there's like 0 places where I could afford to buy her shoes, right? This is a common problem. There's no clothing stores for kids in this town anywhere, and the common feedback on that is, well, they can just drive to Albany, or I'll drive somewhere that requires, if you have a vehicle, if you have gas money. So if you're already navigating poverty, or if you just can't get over there because of your work schedule, or whatever the reason may be, if we're denying like access to basic things like that by the businesses that we have. And I'm not up here proposing any particular business in general, but I'm just saying that that is a common thing that comes up for families. And as somebody that also works at OSU, and seeing people with kids leave because there's nowhere to buy kids' clothes, for example. I'm not even making that up because you already know. That is a thing that people take into consideration, like the convenience of being able to buy socks. We're talking basic things, or things like that for your children. So I just wanted to add that part into, not only with housing development, but when there's pushback on things like children's clothing stores that are not boutiques. And so.
Hi, I'm Bethany, and I'm a student in elementary school and in high school, and I've lived in Corvallis for many, many years. I don't know exactly how to ask this, but the slide that you were showing that had the 6% for the federal funds, and I want to make sure I got this right, the special education support that was on that slide. So if that goes away, if for some reason federal funds go away, does that mean, I'm assuming hopefully this means that not all special education funds and help will go away? That's, I guess, question number 1. And then question number 2 is, what do we have as backups? And what, so the special education, besides IEPs, does that mean 504s, you know, like one-on-one or small groups for dyslexia, like things like that? If you could just speak to some of that and what you see kind of, I know you can't answer all of it, but you know what I mean?
Okay. So that funding is in addition to, we spend about $16 million out of the general fund on special education. And that specific IDEA grant that is federally funded is only about 1.5 to 2.5 million, depending on the year and all of those things. So that is in addition to the money that we're already spending. So we'll just say we spent about $20 million on special education. And all of those things you mentioned are things that we support. So I guess 2 versions of this answer. If those just went away, that does not mean we will stop doing those things. It's not that we're gonna stop supporting students on IEP. We're not gonna stop feeding children. But what that means is that there will be other things that we do have to stop doing. And the federal landscape is changing minute by minute. And I'm not even going to try to make sense of all of the different moving pieces. But generally what our understanding is we don't think that we are necessarily at risk for losing all those funds. What we think is going to happen is that we will be funded at a lower level. And the bigger, I think, question mark is how other federal programs are being funded. So for example, in the state of Oregon, Medicaid, okay? So we receive some Medicaid dollars, small amount compared to what the entire state uses to prop up that program, right? And so if the Oregon's like as Oregon, the state loses all of that federal Medicaid dollars, then they're going to have to divert funds from their budget in order to support Medicaid programming to provide, necessary services to families. And then they're going to have less money to put into education. And we've already been underfunded for, back to the start of public education. So it's pretty complicated. We don't think those things are going to go away. And no, we're not going to just stop serving students, but we are going to have to look at other ways to do it. And we're actually more concerned about some other non-school specific federal programs, knowing that that will divert state funds to backfill that. And then we lose out on the funding from the state into the state school fund. Does that answer all the parts? Okay, yes.
Hi, my name is Amanda. I'm here as a parent, as a second grader and an incoming kindergartner who will be part of the 384 projected enrollment at Garfield. As a parent and other folks in this community, we talked about community schools and loving your community. Looking at numbers, try to make it concise. The question about neighborhood schools, populations, facilities. As an employee for the district, I also know it's extraordinarily expensive to run, like we were just talking about. Questions about solutions when it comes to that 3 million to 12 million to 18 million, when it comes to all of our elementaries, our middles and our highs. I know our population is lowering, but that also brings concern about our neighborhood schools and whether they can keep their doors open. So I don't know, like, solutions related to that.
So where we are at in that process right now, you could see that there's a structural issue, right? That's why you're asking the question. So where we are right now is we are in the middle of a demographics study to look at the trends we're seeing, the trends that the demographers are seeing, and B, what is the capacity of our schools? And so we're working with our architects to figure that piece out. And in August, when we have our school board retreat, we'll be sharing that information with the board with some sort of charter moving forward to have that conversation. So that conversation is going to come. And at this point in time, we know that the first step of that will be in August.
So I think to debunk things that we have heard, all of our current schools will be open in the next school year. Just clarify that.
Hello, my name is Sophia, and I wanted to ask a question about the pie charts at the beginning. So I saw the 100%, of the general fund and how the state and local and 11% and then 4% other. But then there was the other pie chart that showed, the federal 6%. And what were the other categories? So the total funding would be federal plus the general fund plus a couple of other things.
So the general fund, we're in the governmental accounting land. It's way more complex than it needs to be. But we have 6 different categories of funds. So our general fund supports our general operations. Then we have things that we call grant funds. So that's what those title grants, IDEA, student investment account, high school success, all of those things live there. Then we have a debt service account that takes into account paying back the bonds from the general obligation construction capital improvements from 2018. And then we have a capital improvements fund, which is currently empty because we spent all those dollars from the bond. And then we also have what we call internal services funds, which supports things like in the risk management category, insurance for our employees, all of those sort of things. So the first pie graph was just looking at general fund because that is where we support operations. Everything else is essentially a layer onto those general operations. So that's those percentages there. And then as far as the different funding sources that we have, so we have our local funds, which would include just miscellaneous, the investments, donations, things of that nature. Taxes, though, that's the big one for local funds, obviously. And then we have intermediate funds, which are funds that we get through the county. Typically a small amount, like a few $100,000. Then we get state funds, so that's that state school fund, which is another large portion of the fund. And then we receive federal funds, which is that 6% that I referenced. And then the next largest is, it's our beginning fund balance. So really it's that carryover in funds from year over year. So we never start the year back at zero. That would be bad. And so that's how that's recognized. Does that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Okay.
I wasn't able to see.
Yes.
The labels for the colors.
Yes, there's a lot more detail in the budget document. So all the budget documents for many years, if you want to go on a deep dive, are on our new website. And so you can go there and look at all the budget documents from I think we kept up like 10 years on there. And we have all the other ones too, if you really want to go deeper. But they have a lot more graphics and explanation, and we really try hard to not just put in spreadsheets. As much as I love a good spreadsheet, I know that everybody else doesn't, and so there are lots of words in there too. And pictures. Yeah, and art, student art. There's good stuff in there.
Hi, my name is Ken, and I lived in Corvallis for 20 some odd years, and I have grandkids in the schools. I just wanted to follow up on her question because I'm a little confused, because you said that the government federal government gives you 10.1 million, and that's 6% of the budget. So that indicates like 166 million, 167 million. So where's the other 65, 70 million going? That's not in the operating 100 million operating budget.
Yeah, so the about $30 million is in grants. So that's in that second level of funding. So we say a little over 100 in general fund, and then about 30 million in the special revenues, which is our grant funds. And then our debt service. So we sold bonds, over $200 million of bonds, and we have to pay that back.
So it's all fixed? It's all fixed costs?
Yes, the rest of that is for our debt service. So we have those. We also have a bond that we purchased. We sold bonds in early 2000s to buy down the PERS cost, which is the Public Employee Retirement System cost, which is a whole other beast that somehow we didn't touch on, but that's okay. It's not very exciting. And so there's that piece in there. And then the insurance for our employees. So about every employee costs about $20,000 a year for insurance, and we have just under 1,000 employees.
Yeah, so I guess the heart of the question, I guess, is there any opportunity to reduce fixed costs? You have knowledge from?
No.
Just,
staffing, but you're talking about I guess it depends on how you define operations, right?
Well, your 100 million, whatever your 100 million.
From those other funds, no, not really.
You can't sell assets or. I'm not trying to solve the problem. I'm just trying to.
We actually don't have that. I guess this is another thing that I've heard is that we have a bunch of land somewhere. We don't. So we don't really have any assets to sell other than the buildings that students are currently in.
Do you want to say that the PERS is part of the unfunded?
Yeah. So you asked about why are those expenditures increasing so high? So I have a good example of that. So I think, do any of you in here own your own business? Okay, great. So you know that you pay employees, right? And you know that you pay taxes when you pay employees. You know what percent that costs you. For every dollar, how much do you pay in taxes?
15%, 18%.
A little lower, but yeah, around there. So we will pay 42% in taxes because of the public employee retirement system. So this year, every dollar we pay to an employee, we pay 34 cents in taxes. Next year, that's going up to 42 cents per dollar. So you can see that doesn't help us when we're talking about why are our expenditures outpacing at such a high rate. And we don't have the option. That's the other thing, just to be really clear. We can't opt in or opt out of PERS. And we want to support our employees in their retirement. So I'm not saying we necessarily would want to, but that cost is pretty astronomical.
That's an example of an unfunded mandate that I was talking about earlier. That's a really good thing, but did not come with funding. So it's a requirement, but they're like, you have to figure out how to fund it. And we're like, this is amazing for employees when they retire, and do we get funding with it? No.
The question I was anticipating getting that I haven't had yet was related to Osborne. I'm just gonna, I have all these people.
Might as well go there.
I'm gonna go there. So, so many of you know, or have learned in the last month that the school district owns Osborne. The city has maintained it and ran it since '98, but it is our building. And yeah, it was built in the '70s. It was built before Measure 5, so when a community could generate revenue based on their tax rate, and Corvallis was in a pretty good spot. Post Measure 5, equalization happened, and everybody gets the same amount. So we have a pool that was built at a time when the structure was different in terms of the funding that we received. And so right now, we are working with the city on how do we address that, because we know that at the anticipated cost of repair are between 2.4 and 4.2 million, but I think they'll probably be higher than that. And as a school district, as you can see, we're not in a position where we're able to do something like that. So I'm saying it to you now because you're all in this community together, and it's a gem, and it's a resource that we want to have for our kids. And at this point in time, it's going to take the work of this community to pull something off, because the school district and the city can't do it alone. So it's my little plug, because I was expecting the question, but I just want you to know and have a little bit more information about that, because again, it is something that is seen as a community asset. And at the same time, we're not in the position to do that. I'll take care of that alone.
Brian, can
You say something about that?
And I've also been reading online too that people think we just got it in the last few years or wanted to just buy the pool to have it. And that's also, again, it was in the '70s. So I want to make sure people knew how long it's been. Yeah.
Well, I just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask questions who hasn't had a chance already.
That's probably the last question. We have like five minutes.
Yeah.
So in the last week or so, the city of Corvallis did a pretty decent sized report of projecting costs, their capital budget.
Mm-hmm.
There's an expansion project planned for Osborne. $3.4 million.
I'm unfamiliar with that. Okay.
There's money.
Hey, I'm glad I was here tonight.
Other questions in the room?
Is it on the table to sell the pool to the city? To the city?
$1.
That is not off the table.
Anybody else? Oh, okay.
Just to follow, sorry, hi, I'm Veronica, I'm from Corvallis, and I'm a mom here, of a kinder. Just to follow up to this SPED funding at the state level, so right now it's capped at 11%, the average is, I think, 18. Would removing that cap help with some of the deficit that we're seeing?
If it's fully funded, and the state doesn't have the money to fully fund it, is my short answer. So the organizations that we are a part of, I'm on the board of OASBO, which is the Oregon Association of School Business Officials. He is on the COSA. You're not on the board. You're on something. You're doing something with COSA. And so we are advocating more for a increase in cap because it's more reasonable. The tricky part is if the cap is just removed and they don't fully fund it, then we will actually be in a worse position than those numbers look like. Because our enrollment is declining more than what that increase in cap would give us. And if you have to think about it as this full pie, And if they increase, they remove the cap, and then students on IEP receive a heavier weight, but they don't fund that, then the per student amount actually gets smaller. So it's tricky, because for us, actually, if they just increase the cap and fully fund it, doesn't change anything for us out of 15%. It doesn't change our trajectory in the next year. If they fully fund, I don't think there's any possible way they can fully fund it and just remove the cap. It's just the dollars aren't there. And so the more scary part is if they increase the cap and don't fully fund it all the way, because we'll actually have less money. But we are in support of fully funding special education at that level, that state level, like that's what we are advocating for, but it actually doesn't change the picture in Corvallis at all. And it's pretty complicated, and I know it's one of those things that sounds like this is a great idea, and it is, but not unless the dollars are there to back it up, because then it actually becomes detrimental to districts in our position. And actually our special education percentage overall is probably lower than the average. And so those dollars would actually probably more likely be directed to other districts, which is fine, like they need to support their kids as well, but it's not going to fix that problem.
So I'm gonna wrap us up. We'll stick around if you have individual questions for us. But as we wrap up, I just want to share one more thing. So as a community, back in the 70s, there was concern about Hewlett Packard coming into town and all these people moving to town, and the structure of this community changing in such a way that people weren't fond of. So that a lot of really smart people spent a lot of time thinking about how do we keep our little community the way it is. So really smart people figuring out how to do that. So we got a lot of smart people in the room now. It's 2024, and we have to.
2025.
Oh, I was just getting ready to hit it too. I had this whole thing going. And we have a lot of smart people in the room, and we have a significant problem. I want my kids to be able to live in this community if they choose to.
Yes.
I don't think that's a reality right now. And so we have work to do as a community if we're going to get ourselves out of this mess, but we are definitely in one. And I thank you for being here tonight so we're able to share our story with you because it's going to be a rough one, and we need you to know it and be able to share it with your neighbors. So thank you for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. And it's 2025.
2025. Also, just to say, so if you submit a question through that QR code, so I have a budget question and you submit it, the document is not published yet. I will be publishing it on March 31st. And then after that point, it'll be updated every week as new questions come in. So we will get that posted on the website. I also saw that Kelly had out there's a QR code to scan to sign up for our newsletter. I anticipate, not to speak for Kelly, but I'm anticipating that she will allow me to put in a little link to that when she sends out the next newsletter. And so if you want to sign up for the newsletter, anybody can do that. And we also send out a lot of communication through that. And thanks for coming. We thought maybe 5 people would come, so this is good. And we hope that we see you in further engagement.
When is the next city council meeting that we can attend?
Yes.
Scan the QR code. It's on their list.
It's Monday.
It's Monday. She knew the answer. I don't.
Thank you. Gotta get you a thing.